In the eerie landscapes of American horror films, an unsettling trope has haunted the genre for decades. The persistent pattern of black characters dying first. This narrative device, once accepted as mere coincidence or comic fodder, reveals deeper truths about race, representation, and the cultural anxieties that horror often seeks to exploit. From the shadowy alleys of the 1970s slasher films to the glossy teen horrors of the 1990s, black characters have often served as early casualties. They are introduced, given a few lines of dialogue, maybe a moment of wisdom or comic relief, and then, let's just say, dispatched, frequently in brutal or senseless fashion. This phenomenon is so well known, it has become a cultural joke, parodied in films like Scary Movie, and referenced in television shows and stand-up comedy routines. So why are black characters killed first in horror movies? Well, let's talk about it. Sorry, had to do that. Hi, my name is Jared and I talk about interesting stories and trends in black culture. Because, as you guys know, black culture is just so interesting to me. If you share my interest, hit the subscribe button and let's deep dive into some interesting black culture and history in every episode. And before I begin, I'm curious to know your thoughts on my monologue. Do you think I have a future, maybe in horror films? I don't think so. But as Americans, we love our horror movies. We all grew up watching them. I mean, when did you start to notice that all the black people were disappearing pretty quickly? For me, it was early on. This was way more common, of course, when we were growing up, but let me know in the comments and also tell me, why do you think Hollywood loves doing this? The trope of black characters being killed first in horror movies didn't emerge in a vacuum. It stems from a long history of marginalization in Hollywood, where black actors were historically excluded from major roles, let alone heroic leads. When black characters began appearing in horror films, they were rarely central to the plot. Instead, they were often added as sidekicks, stereotypes, or at worst, expendable plot devices. Their deaths served to heighten the stakes for the white protagonist or underscore the danger of the antagonist. Rarely were their lives portrayed as valuable in and of themselves. Take, for example, the 1982 film The Thing, directed by John Carpenter. In the icy, paranoid setting of an Antarctic research base, Keith David plays Childs, a character who survives to the end, though ambiguously. This is a rare exception. In the 1986 film Aliens, Private Frost, played by Rico Ross, is one of the first Marines to be killed. In the 1988 horror comedy Beetlejuice, a black character appears briefly as a voodoo receptionist, of course an example of a reductive magical stereotype representation. And in Scream 2, both Jada Pinkett Smith and Omar Epps' character are killed within the first 10 minutes. In Deep Blue Sea, Samuel L. Jackson's character gives a stirring speech before being abruptly eaten by a genetically engineered shark. Yes, even mechanical sharks are eating black people. It's a moment that perfectly captures the shock value often assigned to the sudden death of black characters, used for effect, not substance. In The Shining, Scatman Cross character Halloran is introduced as a wise and mystical figure, only to be murdered shortly after arriving at the Overlook Hotel to help the protagonist. In the 1985 horror film Friday the 13th Part 5, A New Beginning, the character demon played by Miguel Nunez Jr. is killed quickly in somewhat comical manner. In Final Destination 2, T.C. Carson's character dies about midway through the movie in a gruesome fashion without the character having any depth at all. In 2002's Ghost Ship, Isaiah Washington Greer is lured to his death by a ghost early on in the film. And I mean, the same thing happens in Predator, where the tough Mac Elliott, played by Bill Duke, dies fairly early in the story. The black guy dies first storyline became so pervasive that it began to shape audience expectations. Horror fans learned to watch for the token black character and brace for their inevitable demise. We know he's dead. The stereotype fed into the idea that black characters are expendable, their storylines secondary. Even when multiple characters are killed, the black character's early death often seems predictable, if not symbolic. Sociologists and film critics argue that this storyline reflects broader societal anxieties. Horror films often serve as metaphors for the fears of that era in which they are made. Of course, there are movies about Cold War paranoia, nuclear destruction, social decay. I mean, the list goes on. So, Can the early death of black characters be read as an extension of America's racial anxieties, a symbolic purging of the other? Is it a way of reinforcing whiteness as the default perspective for heroism and survival? This storyline also details the stereotype of the magical Negro or the loyal sidekick. Characters whose whole existence only is there to support the white hero. These characters rarely have their own arcs or depth. Instead, they serve as foils or guides, often with spiritual or mystical insight that help the protagonist. The deaths are framed as sacrifices, but they serve to evaluate the importance of the white character's journey. However, of course, there has been pushback. The 1992 film Candyman, starring Tony Todd, offered a rare example of a black lead character in horror. Of course, he was the villain, but we'll take what we can get. Candyman is not simply a monster, but a tragic figure. His backstory rooted in racial violence and injustice. The film complicates the traditional horror narrative by centering black pain and history. In more recent years, the horror genre has seen a reckoning. Films like Jordan Peele's Get Out and Us place black characters at the center. Not just as the victim, but as the protagonist with agency, intelligence, and complex emotional arcs. Get Out in particular deconstructs the genre's racial dynamics, exposing the subtle and overt ways racism manifests supposedly liberal spaces. The film's protagonist not only survives, but triumphs, flipping the old horror storyline on its complete head. And more recently, Ryan Coogler's Sinners has given center stage to the black narrative that has taken the horror genre by storm. The horror genre, more than any other, holds a mirror to our cultural fears. When it consistently portrays black life as disposable, it reflects a chilling commentary on racial values. Representation matters, not just in who lives or dies, but in whose stories are told, whose fears are explored, and whose humanity is acknowledged. Horror has the power to terrify, but also to enlighten. By breaking away from old storylines and embracing diverse narratives, the genre can evolve into something richer, more truthful, and more terrifying in the best way. Please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button, and I'll see you on the next video.